Well, welcome everybody. Another Wednesday, another time to have some lunch and learn a little something in the process. Today's topic: eating well while eating out. This is a fun topic, and the reason why it's fun is because we get the opportunity to discuss something that every American does. The reality is over 90% of people will eat out at least one time this week, and the percentage is even higher of those that'll eat out two, three, four, 5 times this week. But the whole concept isn't about eating out. That's not the issue. The issue is making good choices when we do so. See, because when you eat out, the whole concept behind the reason why we do it is because it's entertaining. It's something we enjoy. It's the way that we socialize with friends and family and people that we care about. It's a way to share a meal and share your day and share a conversation. Unfortunately, though, what's happened to a lot of us is eating out has now just become a way of life. And as a result, it has caused some issues and problems in our diet and lifestyle that we need to make sure that we are consciously aware of. And that's what the purpose of today is really all about: is to make sure that everyone is aware and everyone is conscious of the decisions that we're actually making. The restaurant industry loves where we are. As you can see the numbers, it has grown exponentially. The estimate for 2017 is $798 billion will be spent in us eating out. That's an increase from 2010 of 586 billion. I mean, yes, the world's population is going up, but so is our consumption of food. The National Restaurant Association in the U.S. really does love the fact that we are eating out a lot more often, and more importantly, we're spending a lot more in the process. In fact, if the American diet looked like this when we went out and ate out, this is what it looked like. The purpose of today's talk would not even be necessary. But the reality is, it looks a little bit different because when we go to eat out, it looks more like this. It looks like, fast food is served to 50 million Americans per day. 50 million Americans a day are eating fast food. The average American consumes about 54 gallons of soda per year. That's more than a gallon a week. McDonald's is serving 75 hamburgers every second. I'm sure McDonald's is very happy with that. The average American is spending $1,200 a year on fast food. That's not even counting restaurants. That's not counting the quick grab and go serves from grocery stores and other things now. Just in fast food alone, we're spending over $1,200 a year, $100 a month. 20% of all American meals are consumed in a car. This becomes problematic, and we're going to learn more today why. But the reality is, when you're eating in the car, the idea is not to enjoy the food. The idea is not to savor or have a conversation while eating the food. The idea is to eat the food as fast as humanly possible and avoid any distractions so that you don't run into the car in front of you, or that you make sure that you get where you're trying to go, and that you've also got food in your belly when you get there. So it's all about how fast can I get it in me. Kids ages 6 to 14 eat fast food 157 million times per month. Remember, 1/3 of our children in this country are overweight. This is a contributor to that fact that the kids are eating fast food at an unbelievable pace. And then, of course, 70% of Americans eat fast food 3 or more times per week. That means 70% of the people that live in this country are getting at least 3 meals per week in a bag through a window in their car. Most of the time, then consuming that meal in the car as fast as humanly possible to avoid the accidents, distractions, etc. So the real American diet does not look like the plate we looked at before. What it really looks like is, in the next 72 hours, more than 90% of us will consume a meal that looks like this. Yes, it'll be in a bag. Yes, it'll come from someone working at the fast food restaurant. And yes, it'll come through a window into our vehicle. So what do we do about this? How do you eat well while eating out if this is the reality? Well, you start out by understanding, what you're fighting against. See, most people, when they think about investments, they look back and they think, man, if I would only put $1,000 in Google or Apple or Amazon or Tesla or Netflix, The reality is, had you put $1,000 in Domino's in 2010 versus the rest of these companies, the value of that investment would be much higher than any of the others. That's the industry that you're fighting. The idea is the fast food industry is one of the fastest growing industries in this country. We are consuming fast food at a rapid pace, and we have to understand what it's doing to us, because when you understand the size of fast food, it is a contributing factor of the issues that we have. 74% of our population being overweight. In 1970 versus 2017, there has been a 300% increase in the size of the fast food meal. The whole super size me generation is in full effect. And in fact, it wasn't just super size my breakfast, lunch, or dinner. It's been super size me, because the reality is the calorie content in these meals has gotten exponentially higher. In fact, let's kind of jump in that real quick. The average calories in fast food, and if I asked most people, which one would have more calories, breakfast, lunch, or dinner, it's not necessarily a trick question, but everyone would have their opinion, and everyone would have their idea of which one is going to have more. But the Journal of the American Medical Association actually went out and did some sampling and testing and independent lab testing to try to figure this out. What they found is lunch has 1,046 calories on average for fast food across the U.S. Dinner, 1,128 calories. Breakfast, 1,226 calories. Now, how could that be? If you think about it, and you think about the way that Americans eat breakfast, a lot of the things that we eat for breakfast are sweet. A lot of the things have, syrups. They have the different frostings. They have all kinds of wonderful ingredients that taste amazing, but unfortunately are adding to the caloric intake at the same time. So what is this doing to us? What happens when we eat these meals? Let's look a little bit deeper. See, when you look a little deeper, what you find is each meal averages 60% of your daily recommended cholesterol, 89% of your daily recommended fat, 151% of your daily recommended salt. So each one of these meals, every one of these that we consume, this is the average. 60% of the cholesterol, 89% of the fat, and 151% of the salt. But it's actually worse than that, because each one of them represents about 56% of your daily recommended caloric intake as well. There's a lot of people out there that are eating, 2, sometimes 3 of these a day. And you can see where the issue comes from. So we at ID Life are not idealists. We're realists. So the idea behind this eating well while eating out is not to tell you eat this, not that. That's not what this concept is about at all. It's to be realistic. It's to understand that 90% of Americans in the next 72 hours are going to eat a fast food meal, or they're going to go out to eat somewhere. And they're going to have to make good choices. They're going to have to decide what they're going to consume and how much they're going to consume, and have a plan of attack. So today isn't about telling you what's good for you and what's bad for you. Today is all about trying to give you an education, trying to inform you. The idea of bad food versus good food is a horrible concept. It really is asinine to me personally that somebody would label a certain food as bad, because as soon as you do that, what ends up happening is the person, when they decide that they're going to consume one of these bad foods, and the reality is they're going to feel bad about themselves, because they don't want to disappoint you. They don't want to fall off the diet that has been designed for them. They don't want to do these things, but the reality is they enjoy the way these things taste, and they are fighting a craving, if not a craving, an addiction to certain things, and they are going to eat some of these things that you have decided are bad, or that society has decided are bad. There's no such thing as good versus bad foods. We need to get that out of our vocabulary. That is just not a reality. The fact is there's choices. And we're going to make those choices. And sometimes we're going to make better choices than we do on other days. And we're going to have off days. And you can call them a cheat day if you want to. And I don't prefer that term either, because it makes it feel like I'm cheating on something. The reality is, we are going to be in positions during our life and from a daily basis where we're going to have to make a choice on food. Sometimes we have better options than others. And the whole idea behind today is to give you an education so that you can make those choices, that you can get informed. That's the whole idea behind this, is just to give you the information you need so you can make an informed choice and understand that certain consequences come with the choices that we make. That's what we've been taught since we were little. But let's figure out what it is we're actually fighting, because it's not just the food. There's other things at play here that we need to make sure that we understand and appreciate. They can help us get the results that we're looking for without having to give up everything that we love and that we like. Let's start out with portion control. This is an interesting thing. This is an interesting topic because a lot of people talk about this, but very few people really understand it. So if I asked you to look at this plate and say, okay, which one has more food on it? If you look at all three of them and you try to decide, okay, which one has more food? The reality is they're all the same. They're identically the same. The reason why this visual is so powerful is because the simple choice of the plate size that we have in our home, the plate size that we have that we eat from when we go out to eat, the plate size that we basically choose when we're buying at the grocery store, the paper plates that we're going to use in the house or anywhere else, can dictate the amount of food that we consume. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in just a second. But you need to understand that this plate size is a big issue. In fact, if you look at the history of plate sizes, in the 1960s, the average was an 8.5-inch plate. In the 80s, it went to a 10-inch plate, and the 2000s, it went to an 11-inch plate, and now we're at a 12-inch plate. Now, what does that really mean? Well, if you go back to the 60s, that 8.5-inch plate would only hold about 800 calories. The 10-inch plate in the 80s would hold about 1,000 calories, the 11-inch plate about 1,600 calories, and the 12-inch plate about 1,900 calories. So why would I be talking about plate sizes when I'm doing a presentation on eating well while eating out? Well, there's this wonderful little thing that we all kind of grew up with, and it's called the Clean Plate Club. See, unfortunately, one of the worst things you can do as a parent is make your kids clean their plate. I know, trust me, I'm there with you. I was taught the same thing by my grandparents. I was taught the same thing by my mom. And a lot of that stems from, and a lot of this started from the Great Depression. When food was scarce, and if you had it on your plate, you better eat it because, there's only so much of it to go around. The reality is this Clean Plate Club has led to a lot of problems. In fact, if you actually look at the stats, 92% of adults eat everything, all of the food placed on their plate. So if you choose an 8.5-inch plate or you choose a 12-inch plate and you serve that plate to an adult in this country, 92% of people are going to eat the whole thing. So that little thing alone, if you remember, 1,900 calories on the 12-inch plate, 800 calories on the 8.5-inch plate. If we simply just chose the 8.5-inch plate, the idea is we're going to eat half as much, even more than half, less than half as much. Because the whole concept behind what we're fighting is a psychological dictation that we have to eat everything that's placed in front of us. The reality is, eat everything on your plate leads to overeating. We basically ignore the signals in our brain that we're full. Bad eating habits, it turns into a shovel fest. We eat as fast as we possibly can to eliminate it from our plate as quickly as possible. Obesity. Hands down, the Clean Your Plate Club has been linked directly to obesity in this country. And then, of course, a lifelong struggle with food. Because once you get into this habit, and that's what it is a habit, you feel like whatever happens, whatever gets placed in front of you, and this applies also to things that come in a bag, by the way. So when you order a fast food meal, and remember 90% of us will eat one in the next 72 hours, everything that comes in that bag is part of our plate, so to speak. We are going to consume it. So be very careful what you order because it could dictate how much you're actually consuming, not how hungry you are. You also need a vocabulary. All right, so we've established the fact that plate size plays a big factor, and now we know why. But we also need a certain vocabulary when we're going to look at a menu. And you need to understand what that vocabulary means. So let's look at these words. What is fried, au gratin, crispy, scalloped, pan-fried, sautéed, stuffed, and buttery mean? Well, what they mean is they taste amazing. Let's be real. I mean, when you see these words, your taste buds fire off. Your mouth starts to water. In fact, you can probably feel your mouth watering right now with me just mentioning some of these words. And you start thinking about your favorite foods that are prepared in these ways. But the reality is, when you see these things on a menu, you need to understand that it doesn't necessarily mean taste amazing. What it really means is that these things are cooked with methods that are high in unhealthy fat and calories. What happens when you cook foods in this way is you are adding unhealthy fats and calories to the meal simply with the cooking method. And just something you need to understand. Again, when there's no judgment here, we're not judging anyone. You just need to understand when you're looking at a menu and you're trying to decide what is the healthier options, if I'm trying to watch what I'm eating, if I want to make sure that I'm, eating well or staying on program or whatever it is you're trying to do. When you're choosing words, when you're choosing foods that are prepared in these ways, you need to understand what the consequence is. Then you look at these terms: steamed, broiled, baked, grilled, poached, and roasted. What do those terms mean? Well, they kind of mean it's boring, it's bland, it doesn't have that same flavor, you don't have that same watery taste in your mouth, it doesn't have that same appeal to you, or at least not to most people. The reality is, what you need to think is a little bit different. When you see these terms, what it really means is they're a healthier cooking method that don't add unhealthy fats or unwanted calories to the food. So if you're choosing things, if you're looking for things on a menu and you want to eat better when you're eating out, one of the things you want to look for is one of these cooking methods, because if you choose these, then you've chosen a healthier option. Again, remember, I'm not saying choose a different type of food. I'm saying a different type of method in the way that it's prepared, because now what you're doing is you're just getting the calories from the food itself, not from the way that the cook decided that they wanted to prepare the meal. One of the other things you need to be very careful of on a menu are things like this: pickled, cocktail sauce, smoked, in broth or au jus, as well as in soy and teriyaki sauce. And the reason why you have to be careful here is for a totally different reason. Remember, 64% of Americans suffer with heart-related diseases. And these methods right here are loaded with sodium. Just loaded with them. Forget all of the other things. Forget all the sodium that is added to food to preserve it. Forget, all of the sauces and gravies and other things that you can add that are loaded with sodium and sugars and other things. These cooking methods right here that you see are just high sodium methods. So you need to understand that when you're going in. If you're going to order something like this, you need to understand what your sodium intake looks like, what it's going to affect in you, whether or not you suffer from heart-related diseases, or for other reasons want to reduce your sodium because maybe you don't want to feel bloated and things of that nature. Understand that these cooking methods will add a lot of sodium to your food. So we've got our vocabulary established. Now, the next section, we've talked about plates, we've talked about cleaning our plates, we've talked about, having a standard vocabulary. Do you trust your instincts? How many times have you heard trust your gut? Trust your gut. Well, the reality is, if you're trusting your instincts when it comes to eating out, you may be listening to the wrong thing. See, we have this wonderful part of our brain called the hypothalamus. It's an amazing part of the brain that controls both hunger and thirst, as well as a few other things. But the idea behind it is it controls hunger and thirst, and unfortunately, we can't differentiate between the two signals. That's right. There's a lot of times when people are thirsty, they're really eating because they read the signal the wrong way. Now, what does this mean if we're choosing foods that have been highly processed versus foods that are naturally occurring, organic, and things of that nature? Well, when you're talking about foods that are like fruits, vegetables, things like that, they have a high water content. And if you're eating rather than drinking, then the body will basically pull the liquid out of the food that you're consuming, and will basically satiate itself from that thirst receptor of the hypothalamus signal that was sent. But if you're eating highly processed foods, there's very little water content in those foods. As a result, you have a tendency to overeat and will indulge in large amounts of snacking, leading to the over 500 calories for men's snack and women's over 450 calories. That is the national average. Because what happens is the body is basically saying, look, I'm thirsty, I need liquid, and you're giving it processed food, so it's going to continue to have you eat those things until it's pulled enough liquid out to satiate the desire that the brain has. So one of the ways that we can fix this issue is pretty simple. If you don't know the difference between hunger and thirst, and most of us don't, the best thing to do is drink a glass of water and wait 10 minutes. Just wait 10 minutes. If you're still hungry after you drink the water, then yeah, you're hungry. If you're not, then guess what? You were just thirsty and you took care of the issue. Yes, it really is that simple. It really is as simple as just drinking a glass of water and seeing what happens. A lot of times, a good tip while you're eating out is when you're sitting down and you're going to, be with friends and things like that. Order a glass of water to begin, drink the entire glass of water, and then see how hungry you really are. Chances are you may be ordering off the appetizer menu, not off the dinner menu. But it's a good thing that you might want to try. Let's talk about this. What's the most important thing needed for digestion of food? What's interesting about this is I ask this question when I travel around the country to, hundreds of different people. And I've never really had somebody answer this correctly. And many of you have your own opinions as to what the answer is. But the most important thing, in fact, digestion does not occur without it, is oxygen. That's right, oxygen. Now, why would I have a picture of a shovel and of a fork? Well, because most people, when they are going to eat, that fork is no longer a fork. They treat it like a shovel. The hand goes to the mouth without the fork ever hitting the table. And in fact, it continues to go up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down until all of the food on that plate is gone. So not only do we have a clean the plate society, but we also have a shoveling society where it's almost like as soon as the food is placed in front of us, we have a clock on us to see how fast we can consume everything that's in front of us. The reality is, if oxygen is the most important thing for digestion and we're not taking the time to take a breath between bites, guess what? The body doesn't have the ability to digest the food the way that it should. As a result, it doesn't have the ability to send the signal to the brain of, hey, we're full. And if it doesn't have that ability, then what happens is we overeat. It really is that simple. All you have to do is take a bite, put the fork down on the table, take a couple of breaths, and then have another bite. Watch what happens. You'd be amazed at how much less you eat. In fact, the national average for those people that spend more than 20 minutes eating is 32% fewer calories. People that take more than 20 minutes to eat average 32% fewer calories than those that don't. The average American is consuming the food on their plate in under 14 minutes. Look at the restaurant chains. Look how fast they turn tables. Look at all the information out there on those issues. The fact is, we are trying to shovel it in as fast as we possibly can. Why? Because we're always in a hurry. We always have time as the constraint. Or we're in a car and we don't want to run into the car in front of us, so we consume it faster than we probably should. But the idea is it just doesn't signal the brain. Now, why is this important? Why am I talking about this for eating well while eating out? Again, I'm not talking about a food here. I'm talking about an eating method. What's simple? It takes roughly 20 minutes for the brain to receive the signal from the stomach that you're satisfied. So if all you're doing is shoveling it in as fast as you can, the brain does not even have an opportunity to receive the signal from the stomach that you're full. As a result, you've probably put too much in, and then you have that feeling afterwards that you overate, that miserable feeling. How many times have you heard people say, oh man, I feel miserable now, I shouldn't have eaten all that? The idea behind it is we eat too fast. Slow down, take a breath, actually have a conversation with the person that you're with. It'll change everything. And in fact, if you think about it, think about the last time you were at a dinner party. Think about the last time you were with a group of friends and y'all were at dinner and you ordered something and you had this nice conversation and everything was going around, and you looked down and half your food was still on your plate, but you were completely satisfied. You were completely full. You didn't need to eat anymore. And think about that same meal the last time you went and you didn't have that same crowd and that same conversation and you ate the whole thing in less than 15 minutes. The reality is, when you add oxygen to your meal, what you're going to do is learn that you eat a lot less. So take some time, enjoy the people that you're with, and actually watch what happens. Here's another thing you need to know. What's the source of your food? Where's it coming from? Now, I will put the warning sign up real quick for everyone. This is disturbing. This really is something that, when preparing for this presentation, was not something I like to necessarily see. Because the information you're about to get is extremely powerful, verifiable, but powerful, and at the same time disturbing. So what's the difference? If I'm looking at salmon, there's a big difference between farm-raised salmon and wild-caught salmon beyond the way that it looks. In fact, most of the people that are watching this presentation have probably never even seen the difference between the two. But on the right, you have a wild-caught salmon, and that's what a salmon fillet looks like. On the left is a farm-raised salmon. Two totally different appearances, and unfortunately, two totally different uh, nutritional fact panels as well. Is this a big issue? Is this a problem? Well, in 2000, there was 27,000 metric tons of salmon sold. By 2017, there's going to be over 1 million metric tons of farm-raised salmon sold. So is there an issue? Is there a problem? Yeah, there's a problem. There's a big issue because it's becoming so that we don't even have wild caught anymore. It's easier to get the farm raised. It's cheaper to get the farm raised. These are the things that restaurants are providing. In fact, I was at a restaurant very recently. I won't name them. I probably should, but I won't name them. Where tilapia was on the menu, and figured I would just have fun with the waiter and asked him whether or not the tilapia was farm raised or wild caught, and I was mortified when he actually told me that it was wild caught. And the reason why I was mortified is because there's no such thing as a wild caught tilapia. It is a farm raised fish. You don't find those in the wild. So sometimes you have to be careful because even when you ask the question, you don't get the right information. You might want to ask where from. You might want to get some more information. But the idea is farm-raised fish is becoming the norm and not the exception. What's the difference? Shouldn't they be the same from a nutrient level? Well, not even close. A wild salmon versus a farm salmon, the farm salmon has 46% more calories. 46% more calories. A lot of that has to do with the fact that they don't have any place to swim, they can't move, and they're being fed grains and all kinds of other things that aren't natural to fish. The amount of fat is 2x in farm raised. The amount of saturated fat is 3x. Omega-6s, look at that, almost 6x the amount of omega-6. Now, what you want is a good balance between your omega-3s and omega-6s. This throws that balance completely out of whack. And then, of course, the big one is vitamin C. Now, there's only 13% vitamin C in farm raised, and there's none in the wild caught. So why isn't that a big deal? Don't I want vitamin C? The vitamin C is not coming from the fish. The vitamin C is coming from the food source that's being provided to the fish. So in other words, what's in the food that we're feeding farm-raised fish? Because whatever it is, the wild-caught salmon are not getting that. You need to ask these questions. You need to understand there's a huge difference between the two. And then, of course, you get to the scariest part. You need to understand what PCBs are. Polychlorinated biphenyls. Now, this is a highly toxic industrial compound. In fact, it was so highly toxic that it was found to have severe, serious health risks to fetuses, babies, and children. And it may also be directly linked to the suffering of developmental and neurological problems for a prolonged or repeated exposure to small amounts of it. Now, in 1977, the U.S. banned this substance from being used in industrial manufacturing, but unfortunately, it did find its way into our environment, and most importantly, found its way into sediments at the bottom of streams, rivers, lakes, and coastal areas. So why would I be talking about PCBs when I'm talking about how to eat well while you're eating out? Well, because we're talking about farm-raised versus wild-caught fish. And when you choose the farm-raised, because it's cheaper, it's easier, it's more convenient, or it's more readily available, the amount of PCBs is 8x. That's right, folks, 8x in PCBs in farm-raised salmon versus wild-caught salmon. Get knowledgeable. Understand this. All this information is coming from the Environmental Defense Fund, but the idea behind it is you need to understand that this is a real issue. That yes, it may be cheaper. Yes, it may be more readily available. Yes, it may be easier to get your hands on. But the idea is you may be compromising your health in the process. So understand the source of your food, and salmon is just one example. We could talk about beef and poultry and all kinds of other things as well. But understand the source and where those things are coming from so that you can eat well while you're eating out. So let's keep calm and have a plan. We're going to eat out. Okay, remember, we're realists here. We're not idealists. I'm not going to tell you have to eat every single meal, cook everything, no oils, and eat everything raw. It's not what I'm going to say. What I'm going to say is I understand that 90% of us are going to choose to have fast food in the next 3 days. But what we have to do is we have to have a plan. We have to go in knowledgeable. We have to go in and fight our, our natural instinct, if you will, and understand that we have to have a plan in place. So, first, ask questions about how your food is prepared and where it comes from. Don't be embarrassed to simply understand that what you are putting in your mouth is going to affect your health. You have every right to know where it's coming from and how it's being prepared. Ask the question. Also, don't be shy about making special requests. It's one of those funny things. Is a lot of Americans, including myself, we don't want to be troublesome. We don't want to be that guy. We don't want to be that girl. We don't want to be, the person that delays things. We want to just, keep it the way that it should be. The reality is, this is our health. We need to understand that, and don't be shy about asking, to have something prepared a little bit different way than it is on the menu. You'd be amazed at how accommodating most restaurants are for those types of requests. Let's talk about gravies, sauces, dressings especially. You can take a perfectly good salad, put a dressing on it, and it becomes worse than the entree from a caloric and fat content. But you really do need to ask for these things to be placed on the side. You control the content. You control how much. You control the decision rather than giving that control to somebody else. Because when you give it to somebody else, you have no idea how much they are using or where it's coming from. This is your choice. So why is this a big deal? Well, if you look at just barbecue sauce, one serving of barbecue sauce is 60 calories, 310 milligrams of salt, and 10 grams of sugar. If you're wondering what a serving is not the bowl. A serving is a teaspoon. 1 teaspoon of barbecue sauce has that many calories, that much salt, and that much sugar. Oh, by the way, if you're one of those people that eats everything with ketchup, just take the numbers on the right and cut them in half. So 30 calories, 150 milligrams of salt, and 5 grams of sugar for every teaspoon of ketchup. The idea is you want to control this intake. This is part of your plan is, get these things on the side and you control how much you're actually eating. So what's a good eating out plan of attack? What's something that we can use? What's something that, we can implement no matter where we are, no matter where we're eating, whether or not it's fast food, restaurant, or even eating over at a friend's house? What's something that we can do? Well, first, turn off the phone. I know, we're all addicted to the phone, but put the phone away, put it over to the side. Get ready to actually have a conversation. Remember, oxygen being the most important thing for digestion, we don't want to have our nose in our phone. Second thing, pick a table away from a television. Scientifically shown that when we watch TV, we mindlessly eat. Again, we're turning off that receptor. We're not having a conversation. We're paying attention to what's on the TV. We're just eating unconsciously and as fast as we possibly can. Third thing, know the cooking method. Know how the food is being prepared. That's very, very important because something can look perfectly healthy, but if it's cooked in a certain way, it can take all of the health benefits away very quickly. 4, put your fork down and take a couple of breaths between bites. Again, this is an easy concept, but the idea is put the fork down. Don't use it as a shovel, use it as a fork. Actually take some time. Remember, 20 minutes to send that signal from the stomach to the brain. Watch what happens when you actually take your time and eat as opposed to eating as fast as you possibly can. 5th, drink water throughout the meal. Remember, it may be that you're thirsty as well as hungry. Give the body what it's looking for. Give it the water. And yes, I do mean water, folks. If you want to have a cocktail, a wine, or some other type of tea or other beverage, fine. But make sure you also order water with it. Consume the water along with the other beverage and watch what happens. You're actually going to satiate that thirst factor in the hypothalamus, that triggering portion of the brain that's, the hunger and thirst center. So make sure you're drinking water with every meal. And 6, enjoy the company and your food. So many people go out to restaurants and they want to enjoy their food, but they forget to enjoy the company. They forget to have the conversation. They keep their nose in the TV or on the phone. Put the phones down, set away from the television, and enjoy the person or people that you're with and have that conversation. Remember, every time we've ever gone out to eat with friends and family and others, when we have those conversations and we're interacting, we look down. We feel bad because we can't eat anymore because we're full, but half our plate still has food on it. This is a great plan of how to eat well while eating out. The most important thing you need to take away from this presentation is this: medicine is not healthcare. Food is healthcare. Medicine is sick care. It's time we see it for what it is. I really want this to set in. What we are putting in our mouths every day, our hand to mouth disease, the food that we are consuming will dictate our health, not the medicine that we're putting in to take care of the sickness that's been caused by our lack of discipline when it comes to the food that we put in our mouth. Remember, there's no such thing as good foods and bad foods. We don't believe in that. There's good choices and not as well choices, but the idea is we're all going to make bad choices along the way. We're all going to make choices that we wish we wouldn't have made, but we all need to understand what those choices are. But we really need to get back to the basics. We really need to understand that the food that we consume, our diet, is going to determine our health care. That medicine is nothing more than something we have to take when we have a sickness, an illness, disease, or condition caused by our the food that we've chosen, the environment that we live in, or the nutritional gaps that have been caused by those things. This is the perfect diet. There really is no such thing as the perfect diet, but if you're really looking for a perfect diet, stop counting calories and doing all those things. The idea is half the plate should be colorful, the other half can be whatever you want. The idea is we need to eat more fruits and vegetables. It's really that simple, folks. We've got to eat more fruits and vegetables. The average American doesn't eat the minimum. And when I say the average, 74% of Americans do not get as simple as 6 servings of fruits and vegetables per day. 74%. So, just get some color in your diet, and realize color isn't necessarily meaning, the color of the potato chips and things of that nature. You know what I'm talking about here. Get some color in your diet and spice things up. You don't have to be perfect to be amazing. Okay, we're not talking about perfection here. We're not talking about every meal. We're not talking about how you have to do this all the time. What we're talking about is just having a plan. Just get a plan in place. Understand that we're going to eat out. Understand that we're going to eat fast food. Be a realist, but have an understanding that when you're making those decisions, let's make the best possible choice of the decision that we've made. Have the vocabulary that you need. Understand your plate size. Understand that your body needs water. Understand that your body needs oxygen to digest the food that you're chosen. Understand all these things, but realize we're not looking for perfection here, folks. That you're going to fail if you try to be perfect. But you don't have to be perfect to be amazing, because you all are. We're all going to have nutritional gaps. Okay, it does not matter who you are, what you eat, how well you eat, how well you try to eat, how clean you think what you're eating is. You're going to have a nutritional gap. That's just a reality. That's just, the food supply that we have in this country, there is a gap. And if you're not filling that gap, you're more in line to be headed towards the medicine aisle as opposed to anything else, because we got to fill those nutritional gaps. And more importantly, we have to understand what they are. Remember, there's a direct relationship here. The diet is a part of healthy living. So is exercise. So is, and exercise doesn't mean lifting heavy things above your head. What that means is moving. 80% of Americans do not get 20 minutes of active walking a day. The average Fitbit is about 3,100 steps. I mean, it's crazy how bad we are in this country of just getting up and moving our bodies. We have to get up and move again. So our diet, our lifestyle, and of course our nutrition. We have to fill those nutritional gaps. We have to understand where they're coming from. We have to understand that our diet and lifestyle choices are contributing to the nutritional gaps that we have. And the better choices that we make in diet and lifestyle, the fewer nutritional gaps we have to fill. But if we truly want to live healthy, these are the 3 components to healthy living. You want to learn more about what's going on at ID Life? You can hear from our CEO, Logan Stout, every Monday night, 8:30, right here where you are right now. He's talking about what ID Life is about. He's talking about kind of the mission, the whole concept behind what we're doing, what we're about, why we exist, and why we do things like this, why we have these types of trainings, why we provide nutritional information to folks, and how we help people eat well while they eat out. If you want to learn more, we actually have our national event coming up next week, next weekend right here in Frisco, Texas, April 20th through the 23rd. Everyone's welcome. We want to see you. We want to come out and talk to you. You need to come hear from a lot of the leaders and people and special guests that we have coming. I mean, it's amazing lineup of folks. Next Wednesday, we're going to take a little break. I'm not going to have a lunch and learn next Wednesday because next Wednesday we're actually going to be playing golf. We're actually going to get out and move. We're going to try to raise some money for Youth Athletes Foundation. We still have some space available here. We would love to have you out. The whole idea and purpose of youth athletes is so that every child has an opportunity to follow their goals, to follow their wishes, to have an opportunity to play, to participate. The whole idea is behind this charity is so that no parent has to say no, because the organization exists to make sure every child has an equal opportunity to participate in whatever sport, event, fine art, or other thing they may choose that they want to do. So check it out. Love to see you next week. So nothing next Wednesday, but the following Wednesday, April 26th, right here, same time, same place, we're going to do a little presentation on how to read a nutrition facts label. Now, this one's going to be fun. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to prepare you now. If you really wanted to read a nutrition label, and we really wanted people to be able to understand a nutrition label, why is it our American school system teaches the empirical system, but every nutrition label is labeled in the metric system? The idea is that you simply do not understand what these things mean or how you go about getting them. It's just crazy that we are allowing this to happen, and we're going to go through that. We're going to teach people how to read a label. We're going to teach them what the labels mean. More importantly, we're going to dig in a little bit deeper and find where certain organizations, certain companies hide things on a label. So, again, nothing next Wednesday other than we'd love to see you out at the Youth Athletes Golf Tournament. But the Wednesday after that, April 26th, 11:30, right here. How to read a nutrition facts label. Can't wait to be back with you. Again, this is Mark Bennett on behalf of ID Life. Until next time, thanks for being here.